Today on CityCast DC, DC's got some incredible historical artifacts. I'm talking Duke Ellington's birth certificate, a will for Alexander Graham Bell, and even some 2,000-year-old hunting camps. But right now, there's not one central place where DC's archives all live. Axios' Cuneyt Dil has been following the plan to build a new, high-tech building to change that. Today's Wednesday, October 25th. I'm Bridget Todd, and here's what DC is talking about. So I understand there's a plan to have a new DC Archives and Records Center building. When I think about an archive center, I think about, the Smithsonian Archives. But how is this new building going to be different, and why do we need it here in DC?
Yeah, DC has its own archives. It's got a lot of historic documents. It's got Frederick Douglass's original will, the birth certificate of Duke Ellington, and all sorts of other things. And they've all sort of sat scattered around the city in various city buildings. There's not one central, beautiful archives for the local hometown, for the District of Columbia. And now there's a long-standing sort of project, and there's a proposal to build a 4-story building.
So you mentioned records connected to folks like Duke Ellington. Is it not just historical documents, also cultural artifacts to the city?
Yeah, there are lots of records, jazz archives. There are a lot of records of the political sort, starting back with Walter Washington when he was elected mayor in 1974. There's even a macabre relic of an electric chair from the DC jail, which is kind of a strange thing, but it's part of the city's history. And some of these artifacts are super old. They're 2,000 years old. There are these hammerstones and fire-cracked rock and hunting objects found on the banks of the Anacostia River in the 90s, and there's not a great place to hold them. So,
where are these artifacts living now?
They're all over the city. Some of them are in a windowless room. Some of them are in on Naylor Court in Northwest at a warehouse. But they're all just sort of scattered around, and some of them aren't really kept in the most ideal conditions.
So all of this sounds great to me. I love the idea of being able to find all of these interesting cultural records and artifacts in one place. But I have to ask, how much will this cost?
Yeah, it's going to cost, it looks like $72 million under this 4-story building proposed. And that's the current estimate right now.
Do you have any sense of what this building is set to look like?
Yeah, it's supposed to look very sort of futuristic in some ways. It's got a glassy facade, at least from what the concept is now. Of course, we've seen lots of buildings where the concept looks very different from what actually gets built, but it's supposed to look like a nice building with exhibit space and a place for 300 people and a multi-purpose room and sort of a community gathering spot as well.
Picture this. You're at the airport or strolling through the grocery store, and suddenly there they are, someone who seems tailor-made for you. You know that feeling, right? That instant connection you can't ignore. But then they leave. Another missed connection? Not so fast. Introducing Never Missed, the revolutionary dating app that turns those chance encounters into unforgettable beginnings. It's simple. Download the Never Missed app for free right now on the App Store or on Google Play. In just moments, you'll be ready to transform fleeting glances into lasting connections. Don't let serendipity slip through your fingers. Embrace the possibility and excitement of finding your someone right when you least expect it. Download the Never Missed app and make your story of how you met an unforgettable chapter in your journey. So I know that this building is meant to be built on University of DC's campus, and they'll have to demolish one of their buildings that is there already. How do the UDC community, students and faculty, feel about that plan?
That's where a little bit of controversy gets in. There are some students who don't want this to be built. It would replace this massive concrete structure on the campus now, which is kind of interestingly named Building 41. And there's some actual opposition to this archives. Some students are talking out and saying we weren't notified about this change and that it would bring a lot of construction and noise, all other kinds of impacts. And they question, whether this would actually be a good use of space for the university and for the students there. UDC students did testify at a hearing last month about their concerns with the plan, and they hope the city will give them more time to express what they think the project should have before it moves forward. And there's going to be another hearing this month where they hope to make their voices heard.
I know one of the concerns is that building currently houses the daycare for students who have kids on campus. I can understand why that feels like a pretty big loss for the UDC community.
Yeah, and there's also concern about a garden there that provides food to a food bank. So there's, concerns there. I'm not really sure why there might not be a solution here. Seems like there might be able to find a way to keep the garden and sort of daycare facilities, but this is moving through a zoning process now. So now is the time for everyone to speak out and put in their word.
Well, that was going to be my next question is what does the timeline for this all look like?
Yeah, so there's a hearing coming up on October 26th at the Zoning Commission. So people can check that out online. They can submit their testimony. And I will say the neighborhood commission over there supports the project. A lot of people who have worked on the archives for many years, really look forward to a day when all the city's important artifacts, from politics to culture to music, can all be found in one place.
I am surprised that it's taken so long to have this kind of archive in DC. Why do you think it has taken so long to happen?
I mean, it's taken a long time, and in many ways because of the money issue. And getting the mayor and the DC council to agree on funding for this has taken many years. And so now we finally have sort of a real plan, a real estimate of how much it'll cost, and they hope that this will work this time.
I'm curious, what do you think a project like this says about DC as being a separate entity distinct from the federal government? Do you think that these efforts can sort of be viewed as part of the statehood arguments, that DC does have its own culture, its own history, thus it has its own records and artifacts that are also important?
No, I think you're exactly right. I mean, DC has its own culture, its own history, and you don't really get to make the argument perhaps as well as you could for statehood if you don't have a place where you can show off the history of jazz, the history of the African-American community in DC, the culture of the city and its political culture as well. And, one of the archive advocates has said, this should be just as beautiful and big as a Smithsonian, and it should show off what the city has locally.
Cuneyt, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
That's all for today here on CityCast DC. If you enjoyed the show, why not share it with your favorite history buff? We'll be back tomorrow with even more news from around the city. Talk to you then.